Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris back in Wisconsin today for a rally in Ripon, an area normally not friendly to Democrats. Joining her for the event, Liz Cheney, a Republican and former member of Congress, now crossing party lines for what she believes is a threat to democracy this November if Donald Trump wins the presidency. Chief political reporter Jason Zimmerman breaks down what was said and has reaction in Your Voice, Your Vote coverage.
Vice President Kamala Harris taking her message to the heart of the opposition Thursday to Ripon, Wisconsin, also known as the birthplace of the Republican Party, to campaign alongside a former rival who is now endorsing her for president.
It is so good to be back in Wisconsin.
Facing a crowd at Ripon College, Vice President Kamala Harris took aim at Donald Trump for his handling of January 6 and riots at the U.S. Capitol, with Liz Cheney calling on Republicans to put their country over politics.
I tell you, I have never voted for a Democrat, but this year I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. In this election, putting patriotism ahead of partisanship is not an aspiration. It is our duty.
The vice president calling Cheney a major endorsement, who she hopes will influence independent and moderate voters in this key swing state.
Anyone who has called for, I quote, termination of the Constitution of the United States, as Donald Trump has, must never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States.
Many of those who showed up drove from across the Fox Valley and beyond.
I came out to see her in person. I was able to go to Milwaukee when Obama was in Milwaukee, and this is almost like one of those once-in-a-lifetime things.
What Harris did not address during the rally were two of the biggest news events of the week: the damage from Hurricane Helene and the Iranian missile attack on Israel. The college canceling classes for the invite-only event, which attracted roughly 500 people. In Ripon, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.
Wisconsin GOP Chairman Brian Schimming commenting on the vice president's trip to Ripon today. Here's what he had to say.
Liz lost her House seat in a landslide and is now running around Wisconsin as a prop for Kamala Harris. So I don't know what that says about her. What I know is over 95% of Republican voters back Donald Trump, and I think he's going to win Wisconsin.